The hall of the Alien Mistress was quiet that night. Tall crystal walls shimmered with pale blue light, and golden patterns on the floor glowed faintly like fireflies trapped in stone. It was a palace made for power, not comfort. And every corner whispered of wealth, but to the human standing guard at the gate, none of this mattered. His name was Marcus, a soldier from Earth, hired to be nothing more than a guard. To most in the Mistress's empire, a human was a lesser being, cheap muscle to stand in the background. But Marcus was different. He carried himself with calm eyes and steady hands, and he spoke little. That silence made the Alien Mistress curious. She had hired many guards before, and all of them had been weak against greed. Gold jewels and rare crystals made them forget loyalty. But this human, she thought, might be different, and she was determined to test him. The Mistress was not a woman to be refused. Her skin shimmered with faint silver markings that pulsed. When she spoke and her eyes glowed softly in the dark like two lanterns, she was powerful, feared, and no one in her court ever questioned her. So when she ordered that night's test, her servants obeyed in silence. As Marcus stood his post, he heard the sound of movement behind him. Servants entered the hall carrying heavy chests. With careful hands they opened them, spilling out alien gold onto the floor. The gold of her people was unlike Earth's metal. Each coin burned with soft inner light, making the air shimmer as if stars had been poured onto stone. The servants left quickly, leaving piles of wealth in Marcus's sight. The Mistress herself hid in the shadows above, her silver eyes watching every breath he took. She expected him to falter, to bend, to pick up even one coin, for no man, she believed, could stand so close to endless wealth and remain untouched. Minutes passed, then hours. The gold glowed brighter under the hall's crystals, but Marcus did not move. He stood as still as a carved statue, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Not once did he kneel to touch the treasure. Not once did his eyes wander. He behaved as if the gold did not exist at all. The Mistress grew impatient. She stepped from her hidden place, her voice soft and cold, echoing across the hall. "Human, do you not see what lies before you?" she asked, her silver-marked hand pointing to the glowing piles. "Enough to buy kingdoms on your earth, enough to never work again, enough to make you powerful among your own people. Take it, if you wish. No one will stop you." Marcus slowly turned his head toward her, his expression calm. He looked at the gold for only a moment, then back at her. "I am not here for gold," he said quietly, his voice steady. "I am here because you asked for a guard, and a guard does not steal what he has sworn to protect." His words echoed in the silent hall. The Mistress narrowed her glowing eyes, studying him. No fear, no greed, no hunger showed in his face, only discipline and calm. She stepped closer, her silver markings glowing brighter as if feeding on her own rising emotion. "You mean to say gold has no power over you?" she whispered, her voice both curious and sharp. "Not when it is not mine," Marcus replied simply. For a moment the Mistress did not speak. She stood before him, a woman of untouchable wealth. And yet here was a human who looked at her treasure as if it were nothing but dust. In her world, power was measured by how much gold one could hold, by how many lives one could buy. But this man stood as if he could not be bought, as if his worth came from something unseen. The test had failed, and yet in that failure the Mistress felt something she had not expected. Doubt. If gold could not move this human, then what could? Was his loyalty real, or was it hiding something deeper? Something she could not yet see? She turned away sharply, hiding her thoughts. "Very well," she said coldly, though her mind was far from calm. "You will stand here until dawn, human. Let us see if your resolve lasts as long as your words." As she left the hall, her silver eyes still glancing back at him, the piles of gold shimmered brighter than ever. But Marcus did not move, his shadow long and straight against the glowing floor. And for the first time the Mistress felt a seed of unease, because she had tested a human with gold, and instead of greed, she had found something far more dangerous: honor. The alien. Mistress did not sleep that night. Even after leaving the hall, her mind kept circling back to the human guard who had refused her test. She had seen warriors kneel for a single coin, nobles betray each other for a handful of gems, and entire families destroyed for wealth, yet this one human, a stranger from a small world far from her empire, had looked at her glowing treasure as if it was nothing. It unsettled her, and she could not let it go. By dawn, the mistress returned to the hall, her silver-marked robes flowing like liquid light. Marcus was still standing where she had left him, his sword at his side, his eyes sharp and steady. He had not sat, not slept, and not touched the treasure scattered across the floor. He looked as though the endless hours had passed through him without leaving a mark. The mistress narrowed her glowing eyes and spoke, her voice soft but edged with challenge. "You stand here as if made of stone, human. Tell me what drives you to resist temptation when every other guard I have ever hired has failed." Marcus bowed his head slightly, but his answer was simple. "My oath, mistress, you asked for a guard, not a thief. My task is to protect, not to take." The words were plain, yet they carried a weight she could not ignore. Still, her heart resisted the idea. No one, not even the highest nobles of her people, had ever been so free from the pull of gold. She began to wonder, was this human lying, pretending only to earn her trust, or was his mind truly built in a way different from her kind? The mistress decided she would push him further. "Very well," she said, her voice smooth but carrying hidden fire. "If not gold, then perhaps comfort. I will see what makes your will crack." She ordered her servants to bring trays of rich, alien food, sweet drinks, and fruits from distant worlds. The hall filled with the scent of roasted spices and glowing nectar, each dish enough to make the finest nobles beg for a taste. The servants set the trays before Marcus, bowing low as they retreated, but the human did not reach for them. He stood as still as before, his gaze calm. When asked why, he gave the same quiet answer. "I was not commanded to eat, I was commanded to guard." The mistress's silver markings brightened with irritation. She waved her hand, and the trays were taken away. "Strange creature," she whispered to herself. "Gold does not touch. Food does not tempt you. Perhaps I must try another way." The next evening she tried again. This time she sent one of her spies, a woman cloaked in shadows, to slip coins into Marcus's pocket. The spy approached him silently, her hand quick as smoke, but before the coin could be hidden in his belt, Marcus caught her wrist, his grip firm but not cruel. "Take it back," he said in a low voice. "I do not carry what is not mine." The spy withdrew, frightened by his steady gaze. When the mistress heard of this, her heart burned with something she could not name. It was not anger. Not yet. Admiration, but something caught between the two. Why did this human not bend? Why did he not show even the smallest crack in his will? Soon the whispers began to spread through her court. The nobles and servants started speaking in hushed voices about the human guard who refused gold and comfort. Some said he was foolish, others said he was cursed, but all agreed on one thing: he was different. The mistress listened to their whispers, but instead of silencing them, she let them grow. She wanted to see what would happen, how long the human could endure before his mask, if it was a mask, finally broke. Late that night, she stood again in the great hall, the gold still lying untouched. Upon the floor, Marcus remained at his post, the same as always. She stepped closer, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dim light. "You are a mystery, human," she said, her voice quieter now, not mocking but thoughtful. "Do you not desire power? Do you not crave to rise above your kind? With this gold, with my favor, you could own lands, you could be more than just a guard." Marcus met her gaze without fear. "I do not serve for power," he said, his tone steady. "I serve because I gave my word. That is enough." His words struck her harder than he could have known. In her world, words were traded and broken as easily as coins. But this human spoke of his word as if it was heavier than gold, stronger than iron. For the first time in her long reign, the mistress felt a spark of doubt about her people's ways. She turned away quickly, hiding the turmoil in her chest. But even as she left, the thought followed her like a shadow. If a human could not be bought, then perhaps she had misjudged the true strength of his kind. And in that thought, a dangerous curiosity began to grow, because the alien mistress had tested her human guard, with gold, with food, with trickery, and with whispers. But instead of weakness, she had uncovered something else, something she did not understand, but could not look away from: honor. The alien mistress was not a woman who allowed questions. Her rule was sharp and unbroken. Her commands obeyed without delay, and her court feared her silver eyes. But after the golden test and the strange loyalty of the human guard, the palace had begun to change. Whispers spread like fire in the halls, quiet voices carrying stories of the human who would not bend. Servants spoke of him in the kitchens, guards muttered about him in the training yards, and nobles gossiped about him behind jeweled masks. They called him the stone statue, the silent sword, the man without hunger. To some, he was an insult, proof that a low-born creature could stand above nobles who sold their loyalty for a single coin. To others, he was something more dangerous, an example that loyalty could not always be bought. The mistress heard these whispers, and though she tried to appear untouched, they weighed heavily on her. Every time she entered her court, she could feel eyes turn toward the human at her side. His presence unsettled her nobles, for his calm defiance made them appear weaker. Some began to press her quietly, their words sharp with jealousy. "Why do you keep this human so close, mistress?" one alien lord dared to ask during a private audience. "He is a servant, nothing more. His defiance insults your honor. Cast him aside before he shames you further." But the mistress did not answer. She only let her silver markings glow brighter, warning the lord into silence. Yet in her heart she could not deny that doubt had begun to grow. She had tested the human, and he had not failed. She had tried to expose greed in him, but instead she had found something stronger. Now the question haunted her: was this strength a danger to her rule, or the protection she had always sought? The human Marcus remained silent through it all. He did not rise to defend himself, nor did he speak against those who mocked him. He stood guard at the mistress's side, his sword always ready, his eyes calm. His silence was louder than words, and that silence spread unease through the court. One night, as the court gathered in the great chamber, a banquet was held. Golden lights filled the air. Music from alien instruments echoed like water over stone, and nobles wore robes heavy with jewels. At the edge of the chamber, Marcus stood watch. The mistress sat high upon her throne, her silver gaze scanning the crowd. But everywhere she looked, she caught the same thing: whispers, glances, hidden smirks aimed at the human. Finally, one of the nobles, bold from too much glowing wine, rose to his feet. His voice rang across the hall, sharp and mocking. "Tell us, mistress, what spell has this human cast upon you?" he sneered. "Does he not refuse gold, food, and power? Does he think himself above us all? Perhaps you should test him again, before your court begins to believe he is greater than his own mistress." The hall grew silent, waiting for her reply. The mistress's silver markings glowed brightly, her voice cutting the silence like a blade. "Careful with your tongue," she said coldly, "for it is not the human who is tested, but my patience." The noble bowed quickly, shame flooding his face, but the damage was done. The court had seen her defend the human, and the whispers would only grow louder. The mistress knew it, and Marcus knew it too. That night, when the banquet ended and the hall emptied, she stood before him in the quiet chamber, her silver eyes burning. "Do you understand what you have caused?" she demanded. "My court doubts me. They question me. They see you as a shadow over my throne." Marcus met her gaze calmly. "I caused nothing," he said quietly. "I only did what you asked. I stood my guard." His words were simple, but they stung. For deep in her heart, the mistress knew it was not the human who had changed the court. It was her. She had allowed him to remain. She had defended him. She had given him power without meaning to. Her silence stretched long, the golden walls reflecting her silver light. Finally, she spoke again, her voice lower now, almost uncertain. You stand without fear, human. You hold to your word as if it were stronger than life. My people do not understand it. I do not understand it. Why are you like this? Marcus's reply was steady, his voice calm. Because without honor, nothing else matters. Gold fades, power falls. But a word kept is worth more than both. The mistress turned away, but his words followed her like an echo in her mind. In her empire, honor was nothing but a mask worn until gold stripped it away. But this human spoke of it as if it were real, as if it could not be bought. That night, when the palace grew quiet, the mistress stood alone on her balcony, silver eyes gazing out at the city of lights. Below, the streets glowed with trade and gold, nobles moving like shadows among treasures. Yet all she could think of was the human guard, standing like stone, loyal without reason. And she realized the truth. The court's whispers were not only about Marcus, they were about her. For the first time in her reign, her people were questioning if their mistress could be changed. The palace of the mistress shined with gold, but under its brightness, shadows always moved. Whispers of jealousy and anger had turned into something sharper, something deadly. The nobles who felt insulted by the human's presence no longer spoke only behind masks. They gathered in secret chambers, their voices low, their plans darker with each meeting. This human makes us look weak, one noble hissed, his jeweled fingers clenching. The mistress defends him, praises his loyalty. Soon she will place him above us all. Another nodded, his eyes glowing with hatred. If she trusts him more than her court, then her court must remind her where true power lies. A human's blood will wash away this shame. In the dark of the city, assassins were hired, men and women trained in silence and poison. They moved through the streets like shadows of the night, slipping through alleys and secret tunnels. Their orders were simple. Remove the human guard and, if needed, remove the mistress herself. Marcus felt the change before anyone else. Though no one warned him, though no one spoke aloud, his soldiers' instincts whispered that danger was near. When he patrolled the palace gates, he noticed eyes following him from rooftops. When he stood watch in the halls, he saw servants who lingered too long carrying trays that smelled faintly of bitter herbs. Even the wind carried unease, as if the palace itself knew blood would soon be spilled. Still, Marcus said nothing. He did not seek praise or reward. He did not run to the mistress with warnings. Instead, he sharpened his sword in silence, polished his armor, and waited, because he knew the shadows would show themselves soon enough. The mistress, however, was not blind. Though no one dared tell her of the growing plot, she could feel the air around her court tightening. Her silver eyes caught nervous glances, her ears caught broken whispers. She was a ruler, and rulers learned to smell betrayal like smoke. But even then, she wondered, was the target herself, or the human she had foolishly trusted too much? Late one evening, the mistress called Marcus to her private chamber. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of silver lanterns. She stood by the balcony, her long robes flowing like liquid light. "You are watched," she said without turning, her voice low but steady. "There are whispers in the shadows, blades being sharpened. I can feel it." Marcus stepped closer, his voice calm. "I know," he said. "They follow me at night. They test the doors. They poison the air. I have seen it all." The mistress turned sharply, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Then why did you not tell me?" she demanded, her silver markings flaring with anger. "Because it was not yet time," Marcus replied, his tone unshaken. "Shadows grow bold only when they believe no one sees them. I wait for them to strike so I may strike back." The mistress's anger softened, replaced by something harder to name. Trust, perhaps even respect. For a moment, her voice lost its edge. "You risk your life for me, human, yet I offered you only gold. Why?" Marcus looked at her with steady eyes. "Because loyalty is not bought, it is given, and once given, it is not broken." The words struck her deeper than any blade could. She turned away, hiding the heat rising in her chest. "Then be ready," she whispered, "for the shadows are close." And she was right. That very night, as the palace quieted and the nobles retreated to their chambers, the shadows moved. 5 assassins slipped through the golden gates, their bodies covered in dark cloth that swallowed the light. Their blades dripped with poison, their eyes cold as stone. They did not come for treasure, they came for death. Marcus heard them before he saw them, the faint scrape of metal against stone, the whisper of cloth against walls, the slow, careful breath of men trained to kill. He stood ready at the mistress's door, his sword drawn, his heart steady. The first assassin lunged, silent as a serpent, but Marcus's blade met him in mid-strike. Steel clashed, sparks lit the dark hall and the silence shattered. The mistress woke to the sound of steel and death outside her chamber. She rushed to the door, her silver eyes glowing, and saw Marcus fighting alone. His sword moved like fire, cutting through shadows, his body a shield between her and death. Blood splashed against golden walls, but none of it was hers. The assassins fought with poison and speed, their blades flashing in the dark. But Marcus fought with something stronger, resolve. Each time they struck, he blocked. Each time they tried to slip past, he stood firm. And though cuts opened across his arms, though his breath grew heavier, he did not fall. The mistress's heart pounded. She had hired him only to test his loyalty, yet here he was, bleeding for her without hesitation. For the first time in her life, she felt something more than fear or power. She felt the weight of loyalty that could not be bought by dawn. The shadows were gone, their bodies lying broken on the golden floor. Marcus stood wounded, his sword dripping red, but still he guarded her door. The mistress stepped toward him, her silver-marked hand trembling as she spoke. "You knew this would happen," she whispered, her voice filled with something close to awe. "Yes," Marcus said simply, and still I stood. Her eyes glowed brighter, not with anger this time, but with something far more dangerous to her world. Respect. And in that moment, the mistress realized the truth. Gold could buy servants, fear could buy silence, but neither could buy what this human had just shown her, for loyalty given freely was beyond price. The palace did not rest after the failed attack, though the bodies of the assassins were dragged away and the golden halls were scrubbed clean of blood. The tension did not fade. If anything, it grew heavier, thicker, like a storm waiting above the city. Every servant walked faster, every noble whispered lower, and every guard kept their hand close to their weapon. The mistress herself moved through her palace with sharp eyes, her silver markings glowing brighter than ever. She had seen Marcus fight, had seen him stand against shadows meant to kill her. And though she did not speak it aloud, her trust in him grew deeper. But that trust became the very weapon her enemy sought to use against her. In the court chamber, the nobles gathered, their jeweled masks hiding their faces but not their hatred. They spoke in poisoned voices, dripping with false respect. "This human is a danger to your throne, mistress," one declared, his golden rings flashing. "He draws blades toward you. He makes enemies bolder. If you keep him, you invite ruin upon us all." Another nodded quickly. "Cast him aside before it is too late. Your empire cannot afford to bow before one human." The mistress's silver eyes burned as she listened, her voice cold as she answered, "You think me blind. You think I do not see your fear. You speak of danger, yet it is not the human who plots in shadows, it is you." Her words silenced them, but only for a time. For power, once threatened, does not yield so easily. The nobles left that chamber with anger in their hearts, their pride wounded, their hatred sharpened, and in their fury, they chose a darker path. That night when the palace slept, the nobles acted. They bribed guards with heavy coin. They poisoned food meant for loyal servants. And they opened hidden gates for killers cloaked in black. But this time, their target was not only Marcus, it was the mistress herself. Marcus felt the shift again, long before the attack began. He walked the halls and sensed a silence too deep, a stillness that did not belong. The torches flickered, though no wind moved. The servants' faces seemed pale with fear. He touched his sword and knew. The storm had finally broken. It began in the heart of the night. The palace doors crashed open, blades flashing, shadows rushing forward with deadly speed. But unlike the first attack, this was no quiet strike of 5 men. This was an army of betrayal, dozens of blades turned. Against their mistress, the very guards sworn to protect her now raised weapons against her life. The mistress awoke to the sound of chaos. Screams echoed through the golden halls. Steel clashed against steel, and the air smelled of blood. Her first thought was not of gold or power, but of Marcus. Was he still standing, or had the betrayal already cut him down? Her question was answered when her chamber doors burst open. Marcus stood there, his armor dented, his sword red, his breath heavy, but his eyes steady. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice like stone. Without waiting for her reply, he moved forward, blocking the flood of traitors pouring through the halls. The mistress watched in shock, her heart racing. Marcus fought like a man with nothing to lose and everything to protect. His blade cut through betrayal, his shield held back the tide. Every strike he took, he turned aside. Every step the enemy tried to claim, he denied with blood. But the battle was not fair. One man, no matter how strong, could not fight forever against an army. Cuts opened along his arms, his shoulder burned with pain, and still he did not fall. Each drop of his blood stained the golden floor, a mark of defiance that no amount of gold could erase. The nobles stepped from the shadows at last, their jeweled masks gleaming in the torchlight. They called out over the noise of battle, their voices sharp with triumph. "See, mistress, your human bleeds for you, yet what is he but flesh? Cast him aside, and your life will be spared." The mistress's silver eyes blazed, her markings glowing brighter than ever. She stood tall behind Marcus, her voice thundering across the hall. "You call this betrayal strength, but you know nothing of strength, for you sell your honor for gold, while this human bleeds for loyalty, and I will stand with him even if the empire itself burns." Her words cut deeper than any blade. The traitors faltered, their fury shaken by the fire in her voice, and in that moment, Marcus struck again, his sword flashing like lightning. One by one, the traitors fell, their blood mixing with his own, until silence returned to the palace. When the last blade dropped and the last shadow faded, Marcus finally staggered. His body shook with wounds, his breath ragged. Yet even then he turned to the mistress and said quietly, "You are safe." The mistress stepped forward, her silver-marked hand catching his arm before he fell. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something far deeper. "You shielded me when gold could not. You bled for me when my own people betrayed me. And tonight, you showed me that loyalty cannot be bought. It must be earned." The golden palace lay broken, its wealth stained with blood. But in the heart of that ruin, something far stronger than gold had been forged. Trust. The palace of gold stood, silent after the night of betrayal. Its shining floors were stained with blood, its jeweled walls scarred with the marks of battle. The nobles who survived kept their distance, hiding behind silk curtains and guarded chambers. Servants walked carefully, whispering of what they had seen, of how a single human had stood against the storm, and how their mistress had declared loyalty stronger than gold. But the storm had not truly ended. The court demanded order, the nobles demanded answers, and the empire demanded that its ruler show strength. The mistress could not hide behind her walls forever. She would have to face them, and in facing them, she would have to choose. Marcus remained in her chamber, his body bandaged, his sword laid aside. Though wounded, he stood as if nothing could break him, his eyes calm as always. He did not ask for reward, nor did he ask for thanks. When she entered the room, her silver eyes searching his face, he only bowed slightly. "You are alive, mistress," he said quietly, as if that was the only thing that mattered. Her chest tightened at his words. This human, who had bled for her, thought only of her safety. She turned away, her silver-marked hand pressing against the cold window. "They will demand I cast you aside," she whispered. "They will say you shame me. They will say your presence breaks the order of my court." Marcus's voice was steady, but soft. "Then do what you must. I gave my word to guard you. Whether you keep me or release me, my oath remains." The mistress closed her eyes, her heart burning. His words were simple, yet they struck like fire. She had ruled with gold and fear her whole life. Yet this human spoke of loyalty as if it was greater than both. And she knew, whatever choice she made would change not only her throne, but her empire. The next day the court was called to gather, the great chamber filled with nobles, their jeweled masks glittering in the golden light, their whispers sharp as knives. The mistress walked through their ranks, her silver eyes glowing bright, her steps slow and powerful. Behind her, Marcus walked, his armor scratched, his bandages hidden beneath his cloak. The sight of him sent ripples through the chamber, gasps, anger, and fear. The High Lord stepped forward, his mask shaped like a serpent, his voice dripping with venom. "Great Mistress, we bow to your rule, but your court demands clarity. This human has stained our halls with his presence. He has brought blades against us. He has made you defy your own nobles. Cast him out, or risk losing the respect of your empire." The chamber echoed with voices of agreement. "Cast him out," they cried. "Remove the human." Their voices rose like thunder, shaking the golden walls. The mistress raised her hand, and silence fell. Her silver markings glowed brighter, filling the hall with light. She stood tall, her gaze sweeping across her court, her voice steady and sharp. "You call him a stain, you call him danger, but I call him proof." The nobles shifted uneasily, their jeweled masks hiding fear. The mistress continued, her words ringing like steel. "When shadows came for me, when betrayal rose from my own court, it was not you who stood before my blade. It was not you who bled to protect me. It was not you who chose loyalty over life. It was the human." Her words cut the chamber like fire. The nobles murmured in shock, some in anger, others in shame. The High Lord hissed, "He is nothing but flesh, mistress. A human cannot stand above us. If you raise him higher, you break the order of our empire." The mistress stepped forward, her silver eyes blazing. "Then let it break," she declared, her voice shaking the chamber. "What good is an order built on gold and fear if it crumbles in the face of honor? What good are nobles who sell their loyalty for jewels? When a man without riches guards me with his life, you demand I cast him aside, but I will not, for he has shown me what none of you could. True strength." The hall fell into silence. Her words had shattered centuries of tradition. Never before had a ruler defied her nobles so openly. Never before had she placed a human above them. Yet in her silver eyes they saw no weakness, only fire. Marcus stood quietly behind her, his gaze steady. He had not asked for this, had not spoken for himself. Yet her choice had lifted him higher than he could have imagined. And in that silence, the nobles realized something more frightening than betrayal. The mistress had chosen him, and in choosing him, she had reshaped the very foundation of their empire. One by one, the nobles bowed, not from loyalty but from fear. They could not defy her fire, not yet. But in their hearts, resentment grew like poison. The mistress knew this, and Marcus knew. It too, their battle was not over. It had only begun that night as the chamber emptied and the golden halls grew quiet again. The mistress stood beside Marcus. "You heard them," she said softly. "You saw their anger. I have made my choice, and now the empire itself may rise against me." Marcus's reply was calm, as always. "Then I will stand, whether it is against shadows, nobles, or the empire itself." The mistress turned to him, her silver eyes softer than ever before. "For gold I could buy 1,000 guards, but none of them would speak those words. And for the first time in my reign, I feel I am not alone." The golden palace glowed under the night sky. But inside, its walls, something greater than gold had been forged, a choice that would change everything. For the mistress had placed her trust not in wealth, not in fear, but in the loyalty of a human. The golden palace did not return to peace after the mistress's choice. Her words in the court had shaken the empire, and the nobles who bowed that day did so only out of fear, behind jeweled masks and silken curtains. Their anger burned hotter. They whispered of rebellion, they spoke of alliances, and they sharpened daggers in the dark. The mistress knew it, and Marcus knew it too. But neither turned back from the path they had chosen. Days passed, and though the halls gleamed as always, the air carried a new weight. Servants watched with cautious eyes, guards shifted nervously at their posts. Yet wherever the mistress walked, Marcus followed, steady and silent. His presence was no longer just that of a guard. To the nobles, he was a challenge, a reminder of the mistress's defiance. To the servants, he was a story, a symbol of loyalty, stronger than gold. One evening, the mistress sat upon her throne, her silver markings glowing faintly. Her court had been dismissed. Her chamber was empty save for Marcus. The hall felt strangely quiet, and for the first time in many nights she allowed her voice to soften. "You know what they plan," she said, her eyes fixed upon the glowing floor. "They will not stop. They will not forgive me for choosing you over them." Marcus's answer was calm as always. "Then let them come. I have faced shadows, assassins, and betrayal. I will face nobles too, if that is the path they choose." She turned her gaze to him, her silver eyes bright in the silence. "You do not fear death," she whispered, half in awe, half in disbelief. "No," he replied simply. "I fear breaking my word. I gave my oath to guard you, and until I fall I will keep it." The mistress's chest tightened. She had heard warriors boast of strength, nobles boast of power, and rulers boast of wealth. But never had she heard words so simple, so unshakable. It was not fear that bound Marcus, nor desire for reward. It was something her empire had forgotten: honor. That night, she made her choice again, not before her court, but in her heart. She walked down from her throne, her long silver-marked robes trailing behind her. She stood before Marcus, close, enough to see the scars upon his hands, the quiet strength in his eyes. Her voice trembled not with weakness but with something far deeper. "Then hear my words, human. I no longer see you as just a guard. I no longer test you with gold. You have shown me loyalty beyond price, and for that, I raise you not as servant, but as equal." Marcus's eyes widened slightly, but he bowed his head. "I am only a man," he said, his voice low. "You are more than that," she replied, her silver markings glowing brighter. "You are proof that gold is not the only measure of worth. You are proof that loyalty and honor can change even an empire." Her words were not spoken to her court, but to him alone. Yet they carried a weight greater than any decree. For in that moment the mistress broke not only the order of her nobles, but the order of her own heart. The days that followed were restless. The empire stirred with anger, the nobles plotted in silence, and rebellion whispered at the edges of the city. But even in the storm, the bond between the mistress and Marcus grew stronger. She no longer saw him as a tool or as a test. She saw him as the shield she trusted, the sword she needed, and the voice that spoke truth without fear. Servants began to notice it too. They saw their mistress walk beside him, not ahead of him. They saw her listen when he spoke, and stand still when he stood. To them, it was a story being written in silence, a story of a ruler and a human bound not by coin, but by trust. One evening, as the sun set over the city of lights, the mistress stood upon her balcony. Below, the city glowed with gold, but her gaze was fixed on Marcus, who stood quietly at her side. She spoke softly, her voice carrying more warmth than it ever had. "When I first brought you here, I sought to test you with gold. I sought to break you, to prove that even a human could not resist. But instead, you proved me wrong. You showed me that loyalty cannot be bought, that honor cannot be sold. And because of that, you have changed me." Marcus turned his head slightly, his voice steady. "You did not need to change. Mistress, you only needed to remember gold fades, but trust endures. That is what I protect, not just your life, but the bond between us." Her silver eyes softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. In that moment, she felt something she had not felt in all her years of rule. Peace, not the peace that came from fear, or the silence that came from gold, but the peace that came from knowing she was not alone. The empire would rage, the nobles would plot, and the storms would come. But none of that mattered in that moment, for the mistress and her human guard had forged something far beyond gold, a bond that no amount of wealth could buy, no dagger could break, and no betrayal could erase. The palace still shone with its golden walls, its jeweled floors, and its glowing treasures. But to the mistress, those things no longer defined her power. Her true treasure stood beside her, silent, loyal, and unshakable. And in her heart, she knew her empire would never be the same again.